What if your biggest failure was the secret to your success? This is the story of Jake, who turned his deepest frustration into his greatest victory, and his journey might just hold the key to yours. To discover how he did it and for more stories that will help you master English, subscribe now and be sure to turn on all notifications. Hello everyone. My name is Jake. I am 26 years old and I am from Brazil. Just 5 months ago, if you asked me to speak a full sentence in English, I couldn't do it. Not one. Even a simple phrase like, "How are you?" made me stop and think too much. I felt completely lost. Today, I want to tell you how I learned to speak English in just 5 months. I did it without any expensive classes, without moving to an English-speaking country, and without wasting my time on methods that did not work. But this is not just my story. I think this is your story too. If you have ever felt frustrated or stuck, or maybe a little embarrassed because of your English, then please keep listening. Because I was exactly where you are now. And I promise you, if you listen to my full journey step by step, you will know exactly how you can improve your English. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to the moment that changed everything for me. My journey did not start with motivation. It started with a big, painful failure. I always dreamed of working for an international company. My dream job was to be a software engineer at a big technology company. I loved coding. I was good at it, and I worked day and night to become the very best I could be. Finally, after years of hard work, I got my chance. A huge company in the United States was looking for engineers. I applied, and a few weeks later, a recruiter emailed me. The email said, "Congratulations, you are selected for an interview." I was so excited. My heart was beating fast. I imagined my new life in a different country. I thought about earning a big salary and working with some of the best people in the world. But then, the interview happened. I remember it like it was yesterday. I opened Zoom on my computer, and there they were. 3 interviewers, all native English speakers, smiling at me from the screen. They started speaking, and suddenly I felt like someone had pressed the fast-forward button on their voices. The words came at me so quickly, I couldn't understand anything. One of them asked the first question. "Jake," she said kindly, "can you tell us a bit about yourself and your experience in software development?" I panicked. A wave of heat washed over my face. I knew the answer. In my mind, in Portuguese, the answer was perfect. But the English words, they just did not come out. I opened my mouth and said, yes, I am, software. I do coding, many projects. Good. I am very good." They just looked at me. Their faces were patient, but I could feel the silence. The silence felt heavy, like a knife in my stomach. They asked another question, a technical one this time. But I could not answer that one either. My mind was completely blank. In the end, one of the men smiled a gentle smile and said, "All right, Jake. Thank you for your time." I knew what that meant. I had failed. I closed my laptop and just sat there staring at the black screen. I did not get the job. And the reason was not my skills. I was a good engineer. The reason was my English. That day, I understood the true power of English. It was not just a language. It was the key to my dream. And I did not have that key. I felt so ashamed. I was embarrassed and angry at myself. For years, I had told myself, I don't need English. I'll just be very good at my job, and that will be enough. But now I saw the truth. Without English, I was invisible. That night I could not sleep. I looked out my window at the quiet city, and I made a decision. I would learn English, and I would learn it fast. Most people, when they decide to learn English, do one thing first. They pay for expensive courses. But I did not do that. Why? because I had already tried them before, and for me, they did not work. About a year ago, I paid for an online English class. The teacher made me memorize long lists of vocabulary. We did grammar exercises from a book and studied boring rules. But after 3 months of this, when I tried to have a real conversation, I still could not speak. The words were not there when I needed them. So I knew that expensive classes were not the answer for me. If I wanted to learn English fast, I needed something different. I needed a system that worked in real life, not just in a classroom. And that's when I started my 5-month method. I am going to share it with you now, step by step. Part 1. The first 15 days. The biggest mistake that beginners make is thinking they need more words. I thought the same thing. I believed that if I could just learn 1,000 new words, I would magically become fluent. But the truth was, I already knew hundreds of words. I could read them. I could understand them when I saw them written down. Yet I still could not speak. So for the first 15 days, I decided not to study any new words. Instead, I did something much more powerful. I started learning how to use the words I already knew. Here is exactly what I did. First, I made a survival sentence list. I sat down with a notebook and a pen, and I thought, what do I actually need to say in my everyday life? I wrote down 50 simple sentences that I would need in real situations. Sentences like, "Hi, how are you? Can you please repeat that? I'm sorry, I don't understand. I am learning English. And of course, I need a coffee, please." Every single morning, I read these 50 sentences out loud. Not just once or twice. I read them 10 times. At first, my tongue felt slow and clumsy. The sounds were strange. But after about 5 days, something amazing happened. These sentences started to become automatic. I didn't have to think about them anymore. Second, I started speaking to myself in English every single day. I know it sounds a little strange, but this is one of the most powerful things I did. Whenever I was alone, I would describe what I was doing in English out loud. For example, when I was in the shower, I would say, "I am taking a shower now. The water is warm. I feel relaxed." When I was making my breakfast, I would say, "I am making eggs. I like eggs. They are easy to cook." At first, I felt a little stupid talking to myself, but then I realized something important. This was my private classroom. There was no one there to hear me. No one could judge me. I could make mistakes, and nobody would know. In just 1 week of doing this, my brain started to think in English more often. Third, I practiced 5 sentences a day, but with a special trick. Every day, I chose 5 interesting sentences from movies or real conversations I heard online. But I did not just read them. I copied them. I tried to repeat them exactly as I heard them. I would listen to the native speaker, and then I would repeat the sentence 10 times, trying to match the same emotion, the same speed, and the same pronunciation. This helped me to fix my accent and to sound more natural, more like a real person speaking. By the end of those first 15 days, something had changed inside me. I noticed that I was starting to stop translating in my head from Portuguese to English. I could say basic sentences without stopping and thinking. I felt a small but important spark of confidence. But I knew this was only the beginning. After 15 days, I was ready for the real practice. Part 2. The real practice begins. After 15 days of fixing my biggest mistake, I was ready to take the next step. I could say basic sentences, and my confidence was growing. But I knew this was not enough. I didn't just want to say short sentences. I wanted to have real, interesting conversations. I wanted to understand native speakers without feeling lost. I wanted to speak fluently. So I created a new plan for myself. This plan was what truly changed everything. And if you follow it, I believe you will improve faster than you ever thought was possible. I realized something important. When I tried to speak English, my brain felt slow. I knew the words, but I couldn't put them together quickly enough. It was like I had all the ingredients to cook a meal, but I didn't know the recipe. I needed a way to make speaking feel natural and automatic. So I started using a method that I now call the question and answer method. This method is very simple, but it is incredibly powerful. Here is how it works. First, I would ask myself a simple question in English. Second, I would answer it immediately without thinking too much. Third, I would repeat the process, but I would try to give a different or longer answer each time. For example, I started with a very easy question. What did you do today? At first, my answer was very short. I worked. But I forced myself to say more. I tried again. I worked on my project. Good. I asked again. I worked on my project for 3 hours. Even better. I worked on my project for 3 hours, then I took a break. And again. I worked on my project for 3 hours, then I took a break and had some coffee. Every time I answered, I added a little more detail. This simple exercise trained my brain to think in English and to build sentences more quickly, without hesitation. Here is another example. The question was, what did you eat for breakfast? My first answer, I ate eggs. My second answer, I ate eggs and toast. My third answer, I ate eggs, toast, and a banana. My fourth answer, I ate eggs, toast, and a banana because I was really hungry. My fifth answer, I ate eggs, toast, and a banana because I was really hungry and I love eating a big breakfast. I did this every single day for at least 30 minutes. My speaking speed improved dramatically. My sentences became longer and more complex, and most importantly, I finally stopped translating in my head. My next big problem was pronunciation. Even when I spoke English, I still sounded like a foreigner. People could understand me, but my accent was very strong. So I used something called the echo technique. This is the best way I know to improve your pronunciation without a teacher. Here is how it works. First, I would listen to a native speaker. This could be from a movie, a YouTube video, or a podcast. Second, I would pause the audio after each sentence. Third, I would repeat the sentence exactly the same way. I tried to copy the same speed, the same tone, and the same emotion. For example, I took a short clip from a movie I liked. A character said, "I don't know what you're talking about." I paused the video, and I repeated, "I don't know what you're talking about." At first, it felt difficult. My mouth felt strange. But after repeating it 10 times, my voice started to sound more similar to the native speaker. I did this with another clip this time from a podcast. The speaker said, "It was a beautiful day, so I decided to go for a walk." I paused. I repeated, "It was a beautiful day, so I decided to go for a walk." I did this every day for 30 minutes. After about 1 month, my pronunciation improved so much that even native speakers started saying things like, "Wow, your English sounds really natural." Of course, I knew that vocabulary was important, but I also knew that memorizing long lists of words does not work. You forget them quickly. So I needed a better method. I used the story method. Here is how it works. First, I would choose 5 new words every day. Second, I would create a short, simple story that used all 5 of those words. Third, I would read that story out loud to myself 10 times. Fourth, I would try to use those new words in my real conversations that day. For example, one day my 5 new words were excited. Invitation party arrive and surprise. So I wrote a very short story. I was very excited because I received an invitation to a big party. When I arrived at the party, I got a huge surprise. It was my birthday party. I did this every day. After 3 months, I had learned over 1,000 new words, and I didn't feel like I was memorizing anything. I was learning them naturally. One of the biggest problems for language learners is that they think in their native language first, and then they translate into English. This is what makes speaking so slow and unnatural. I had to train my brain to think directly in English. Here is how I did it. First, I started to describe everything around me in English, but silently in my mind. When I walked outside, I would think to myself, "The sky is blue. The weather is hot. I see people walking. That man is wearing a red shirt." Second, I started to ask myself questions and answer them in my head in English. What am I doing right now? I am sitting in a chair. I am drinking coffee and writing in my notebook. Third, I started to write my daily journal in English. Every night before I went to sleep, I would write a little bit about my day. At first, my sentences were very simple, but after a month, my writing started to become more natural and detailed. After a few weeks of doing all of this, I noticed something amazing. I was no longer translating. When I wanted to say something, the English words just came naturally into my mind. Finally, I made one simple but powerful rule for myself. Every day I had to speak English for at least 2 hours. No excuses. If I had no one to talk to, I talked to myself. If I thought I didn't have time, I would speak English while I was doing other things like cooking, cleaning, or walking. If I felt lazy, I would remind myself, "Jake English is your future. You cannot quit." Part 3. My final breakthrough. Now that I had built the habit of listening and speaking every day, I wanted to push myself even further. But I also realized something very important. Just listening and speaking would not be enough if I did not understand the grammar and structure of English properly. I didn't want to make big mistakes that could confuse people, and I really wanted to sound more natural. So I started to observe the way native speakers built their sentences. Every time I heard a sentence in a movie or a podcast, I didn't just repeat it. I asked myself, why is this sentence structured like this? Why did they say it that way? For example, I often heard people say, "I have been learning English for 5 months." But in my school textbooks, I had learned to say, "I am learning English for 5 months." This was my first big realization. The English we learn in school is often very different from the English that people actually speak in real life. So I started researching these small differences. I learned about how people use different tenses in real life. When do they use the present perfect tense? Why do they say, "I have been learning," instead of "I am learning"? I found that small details like these made a huge difference in sounding natural. I started to write down these common sentence structures in my notebook and tried using them in my daily practice. One of my biggest challenges was prepositions, those little words like on, in, at. Why do we say on the bus, but in the car? Why do we say at night, but in the morning? I kept a small notebook just for prepositions. Whenever I was confused, I would write down the sentence with an example. I would search for answers online or just listen carefully to how native speakers used them. To take this all a step further, I continued writing in my daily diary. Every night, I wrote about my day. At first, my writing was very simple. Today, I went to work. I was tired. I ate pizza. It was good. But I wanted to improve. So I started reading blogs, books, and news articles written by native speakers. I noticed how they structured their sentences and how they connected their ideas. Then I tried to copy that style in my own diary. One technique that really helped me accelerate my learning was shadowing. This is a little different from the echo technique. For shadowing, I would find videos of native speakers put on my headphones and I would try to repeat every word immediately after them at the same time, matching their speed and pronunciation. It was like I was their shadow. I did this for at least 20 minutes a day. It was difficult at first, but in just a few weeks, my pronunciation improved dramatically. I also continued watching English movies with English subtitles. But instead of just watching passively, I would pause the movie after an interesting sentence and repeat it out loud. I focused on the pronunciation, the tone of voice, and the rhythm of the language. Slowly, my own English started sounding more and more natural. At this stage, I realized something crucial. English is not just about words and grammar. It is also about confidence. I knew many people who knew a lot of English, but they were too scared to speak. I made a decision. I would not be afraid of making mistakes. I started speaking to people in English whenever I got the chance. At the store, at a coffee shop, with friends who knew some English. I spoke even when I was not sure if my sentence was perfect. And I noticed something surprising. People understood me. Even if I made small mistakes, they did not laugh at me. They were patient. This gave me the confidence I needed to keep going. But then I had to face my biggest fear, talking to native English speakers. I was terrified that they would not understand me or that I would freeze up just like I did in my interview. So I came up with a strategy. I prepared 10 common conversation topics. Topics like, how was your day? What do you do for work? And what's your favorite food? I practiced answering these questions until I could do it fluently. Then I took the big leap. I joined an online language exchange group where people from different countries practiced English together. At first, my hands were sweating. I was so nervous. But I soon realized that everyone there was just like me. They were all there to learn. I made friends from different countries, and we practiced speaking together. This not only improved my English, but it also made learning fun. As I reached the final stage of my 5-month journey, I felt a new, unshakable confidence growing inside me. I was no longer the same person who had been rejected because of his poor English. I had transformed myself step by step through consistent effort, daily practice, and the right mindset. Now I want to share the last and most important lessons I learned. One day I was speaking to myself in the mirror, as I had done so many times before. But this time, something was different. I was not hesitating. I was not translating in my head. The words were just flowing out naturally and easily. It felt like magic. But I knew it was not magic. It was the result of months of hard work. That same day, I decided to test my progress. I wanted to have a deep, real conversation with a native speaker. I joined an online discussion group where people from different countries talked about various topics. At first, I felt that old nervousness coming back. But I told myself, I have worked too hard to doubt myself now. And then I spoke. The words came out clearly and confidently. I did not struggle to find the right words. I understood everything the other people were saying without feeling lost. People listened to me. They nodded in agreement. They even asked me questions about my opinions. It was an incredible moment. That was the day I knew I had achieved fluency. 5 months after I started my journey, I applied for my dream job again, at the same company. This time, I was not the same Jake who had walked in nervously months ago. I was not the guy who hesitated, who felt small, who could not find the right words. No. This time, I walked into that interview room with my head held high. I felt a quiet confidence. I sat in front of the interviewers not as someone who feared English, but as someone who had mastered it. I spoke clearly. I answered every question with ease. I was not just speaking English. I was communicating. I was connecting. and I could see it in their eyes. They were impressed, not just with my language, but with my effort, my persistence, my transformation. A few days later, I got the call. I will never, ever forget that moment. A voice on the phone said, "Jake, congratulations, you got the job." For a second, I could not believe it. My dream job, the same company that had rejected me. But now, they wanted me. My starting salary was $5,000 a month. $5,000. It was more money than I had ever imagined earning. I just stood there in my room holding my phone, shaking a little. My eyes were full of tears. The first thing I did, I called my parents. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice breaking. "I did it." My mother started crying on the other end of the phone. My father, a man who rarely shows his emotions, simply said, "We always knew you could, son." And in that moment, I realized that I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for them, too. With my very first salary, I bought my father a beautiful watch. It was something he had always wanted, but would never buy for himself. For my mother, I bought a gold necklace. She had sacrificed so much for me, for our family, and now it was my turn to give something back. When I handed them the gifts, they refused at first. "We don't need anything, son," they said. But I shook my head. "No," I said. "This is my way of saying thank you. Thank you for believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself." And that was the moment I understood that it was all worth it. Every struggle, every late night studying, every moment of frustration, every time I felt like giving up, it was all worth it for this. Key lessons from my journey. Now let me share the most important things I learned in my journey that helped me become fluent in English in just a few months. First, your mindset is everything. Most people fail to learn English because deep down, they believe they can't. I used to think the same way. But the moment I changed my mindset, everything else began to change. I told myself, English is not difficult. It is a skill, and I can learn it just like any other skill. I stopped saying, "I am bad at English," and I started saying, "I am improving every day." If you think you can't do it, you won't. But if you believe you can, you will find a way. Second, surround yourself with English. I made English a part of my daily life. I changed my phone's language to English. I watched only English movies and YouTube videos. I listened to English songs even if I didn't understand all the words. I followed English-speaking people on social media. Every day I was feeding my brain with English. I also made sure to speak and think in English whenever I could. If I saw a car, I would think, "That's a blue car. It's moving fast." Small things like this helped me build my vocabulary naturally. Third, speak without fear. So many people are afraid of making mistakes. But mistakes are a normal and necessary part of learning. I used to be scared of speaking, but then I realized that native speakers don't care if you make small mistakes. They appreciate that you are making an effort. So I forced myself to speak. I spoke to shopkeepers in English. I asked strangers for directions in English. And yes, I talked to myself in English when I was alone. The more I spoke, the better I became. Fourth, practice active listening and shadowing. Listening is just as important as speaking. I trained my ears to understand real spoken English by listening to English podcasts, audiobooks, and conversations every day. But I didn't just listen passively. I practiced shadowing. Remember, that means listening to a sentence and repeating it immediately, trying to copy the pronunciation and rhythm. This really helped me improve my accent and my fluency. Fifth, expand your vocabulary in a smart way. At first, I tried memorizing long lists of words. It was useless. Instead, I started learning words in context. I focused on learning whole phrases instead of single words. For example, instead of just memorizing the word happy, I learned phrases like, I feel so happy today, and that movie made me really happy. Learning words in context in real sentences made it much easier to remember and use them naturally. Sixth, learn grammar without books. I did not spend hours and hours studying grammar books. Instead, I learned grammar naturally by listening and speaking. When I made a mistake and someone corrected me, or I heard a native speaker say it differently, I noted it and corrected myself. For example, I used to say, he go to school. When I heard people say, he goes to school, I understood the rule without opening a book. The best way to learn grammar is by using the language, not by memorizing rules. And seventh, remember that consistency is more important than perfection. Some people try to learn everything perfectly before they start speaking. That is a big mistake. I did not wait until I was perfect. I started speaking from day one, even when I only knew a few words. I made a simple rule for myself. Every day I will do something in English. Some days I spoke for 10 minutes. Some days I wrote a short paragraph. Some days I just listened to a podcast. The key was consistency. Even on the days when I felt tired or lazy, I still did something. You do not need expensive classes. You do not need a perfect environment. You just need a strong desire to learn and a commitment to practice every single day. Imagine yourself 6 months from now speaking English fluently and confidently. Imagine the new opportunities that will open up for you. Imagine how proud you will feel. Start today. Speak, listen, practice, and never, ever give up. Your future self will thank you for it. This is not just about learning English, it is about changing your life. And now I want to say something directly to you, the person listening to my story. If I can do it, you can do it too. It does not matter where you start. It does not matter how bad you think your English is right now. What matters is that you start. Today, right now. I know it can feel hard. I know it can feel impossible sometimes. But please trust me. The only thing standing between you and fluency is consistency. Stop doubting yourself. Stop making excuses. Surround yourself with English. Speak. Listen, read, and write every single day. Make mistakes. Learn from them. And improve. Because here is the truth. The pain of discipline is temporary, but the pain of regret lasts forever. So what will you choose? Choose discipline. Choose growth. Choose success. Your journey to fluency starts now. Thank you for listening to Jake's story. If his journey inspired you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. I will be here with you every step of the way. Let's do this together.